For this wall framing session, I'll cover automatic and manual framing, framing defaults, schedules, and materials list. Also, the process of creating a wall framing save plan view and wall framing section view. This is the layout sheet for the wall framing I'll be working on in the session. The project is from the Austin sample plan found on our website. Chief Architect has the option to generate automatic wall framing. This is the easiest and recommended way to begin the framing process. Let's begin this session with the automatic framing. Under the Build menu, down under Framing, you'll find the option to build framing. I'm on the wall panel, and at the very top is the setting to automatically build the wall framing. Down below are several of the default settings that you can define. The stud thickness, the spacing. For the stud width, that is actually defined in the wall itself. If you're using a 4-inch wall or a 6-inch wall, it will either use a 2x4 or a 2x6 to fill that cavity. The stud spacing can also be changed by the wall type itself. I'll show you that in a minute. The wall connections, if you want to change the wall corners or the wall intersections, you'll see a drop down to change the different styles for those intersections and corners. For the wall plate information, you can define the count, the thickness, the bottom plate count, and the thickness, as well as the max plate length if you're going to get to that level of detail. Options for how you're going to do the blocking, and a few other options for your wall framing. Let's go ahead with the automatic wall framing turned on, create that wall framing for this project. You see in the 2D view all of the studs fill in, and in a 3D view we have a specific framing camera that you can use to see the wall framing. In this case, for my layers, I have turned on the windows and the doors. That's a layer that you can toggle on and off depending on what your preference is for the project. So the wall framing has automatically been generated, and the program does a pretty good job. Now, if you have certain walls that are being engineered or have special requirements, you can take the automatic framing and customize it to meet your design needs. Let me go back over into the framing plan view. In this view, I'm using the out-of-the-box Save Plan view for the framing. It may actually be called the Framing Floor Plan view. I've renamed mine just to Framing. This can get a little bit cluttered when you have floor framing and roof framing on. I like to build a defined Save Plan view specifically for wall framing and a corresponding layer set. You can see I've actually already created a Save Plan view for the wall framing. It doesn't do a lot, but if I'm using that, it will turn off the framing for the roof and the floor should that be created in your project. The process for creating a Save Plan view, click on the Save as Active view. Once you do that, the program will prompt you the name of the saved view. We'll go ahead and call it the Wall Framing 2, and then also when we come and edit the active view, come over to the selected defaults. At the very bottom you can see that I've also created a layer set called Framing Wall. You can click the Define button and then make a copy of this set, and then what you might want to do is come down to the Framing category, just type in Framing, and then you can turn off different things like roof rafters, floor joists, and create that new layer set. So if you're going to go through the process of having a wall framing view and do a lot of work in a wall framing view, you might consider building a save view and layer set so that it just cleans up the view and makes it easier to work in. For each individual wall, you can open up the wall framing detail. I'm going to click on the far left-hand wall. When the framing is created, in your lower edit menu is the option to open up the wall detail. This will only exist if you've created the wall framing. In the wall detail, you might notice above the opening a gap in the framing. Back over in the 3D view, as we rotate around to take a look at this same wall, you can see that it's a shed wall and the framing appears to be in good shape. The reason in the wall detail that the framing is missing from the area above the window is because the framing is being generated in the attic wall. In the overall 3D view, it looks fine. If you're going to be putting together a wall framing guide for the construction crew, you may want to make a change in this wall so that it generates more like you might create it in the field. Process of doing that, let's go into the floor plan view. I'm going to double click on this wall, and you'll find an option underneath the structure panel to balloon the wall through the ceiling above. And since my automatic framing is still on, we go back over into the wall detail, you can see that the framing now looks more like you might create it in the field with this shed style wall. In this case, with the balloon framing, there is no ceiling in the room. This happens to be the bedroom on the other side. There is no ceiling in there. The ceiling is being created from the underside of the roof. That balloon framing option will allow you to frame it more like you might do in the field. When you open up an individual wall detail like we have here on the screen, you can dimension it, and you can also create a schedule for your materials. In this example for this project, you can see on the layout sheet I've placed all of the individual walls, and then below each of the walls I put the material schedule. Let's take a look at placing the dimensions and also creating a framing schedule for this particular wall. Let's first do some dimensioning on this view. In my drop down, you see that it says it's using the active defaults. I'm going to switch that for this view to be framing. Once I've switched it, let's come over and edit the active view and take a look at the dimension defaults for framing. On the Locate Manual panel, you can see I have the wall dimension layer selected. And then as we scroll down, the openings selected for rough opening. There's some CAD objects that are selected, and then for the framing there is both sides, single side, or centers. Depending on your dimensioning, if you're going to be dimensioning to the studs maybe in a plan view or even an elevation view, you may want to change it to centers. Currently I have both sides selected and then a number of CAD objects. The next dimension to check is the end-to-end dimension. Should be very similar settings, the wall dimension layer, rough openings, and then as we come down to the framing, you can see that I have both sides selected. With the end-to-end and manual dimensions complete, let's go back in and use the end-to-end dimension tool. Then I'll just dimension the opening, so slide, get the snap on each of the sides. Just pull that over, and then we'll do the vertical variation of that. Slide down, pick up this one. Let me grab the horizontal snap off of this one, and then we'll do this one over here. Once I have the dimensions in place, you can customize those. You can move them around as you need to. You can add additional dimensions, whatever you think you need for your job out in the field. Let's go ahead and zoom out a little bit, and I want to look at placing a wall schedule for all of the framing materials for this particular wall. Underneath the Tools menu, I'm going to come down to the Schedules, and specifically I want to come over into the Framing Schedule and place the framing schedule for this wall. If I double click on the framing schedule, I can then customize the materials going into it. Let me go ahead and double click on the schedule. One of the things that I like to do for my framing schedules is give it a specific name. You can use variables that are macros, and I'll show you how to get those. I'm going to paste them in. You can see that I have a couple of variables with percent signs, view name, and floor number. Let me show you how to get those in just a second. But what this will do is it will name the schedule so that it has the information for wall detail. That will match the wall detail callout, in this case 35, on your floor plan. How do you get those variables? Let's just throw in a text object and I'll show you real quickly. So I'm going to come over here, turn the layer on for a text object. In the macro panel off to the side, I'm going to come over on the global side, plan info. You see the word view name. That is where I'm getting the word wall detail. And then if we come back over to object specific, the floor number is found with the percent floor number. And those are the two details. As we close that back up, go back into the schedule. Those are the two variables that I typed in, and it can be very defining for each of your wall schedules so that it matches your floor plan callout with those labels. Now for the columns that you can include and exclude, some of these may not be very meaningful. The material information, I'm going to go ahead and remove that. Type information, probably not needed. Remove that. and then you can move these fields up and down as you need to. Once you've finished, now you have the detail schedule that you have for each wall. If you want to send this out to your layout sheet, you can find that under your File menu, File, Send a Layout, and then you'll have that detail that looks like this framing view that I've created for this layout sheet in this particular project. We just looked at a wall detail for a single wall. In this example on the layout sheet at the top, you can see that I have the framing for the entire front of the house. In lieu of several individual wall details, let's look at how you can create this type of view using the back clip cross-section camera. In the floor plan view, using the back clip cross-section camera, I'm going to come down and I'm going to create a small cut right through the front portion of the house. When the section appears, I'm going to open up the Active Layer Display options. I'm going to switch the layer set from the section view to a view that I have called Section View Framing. If you want to create unique individual layer sets, you can do that by creating a specific layer set. Just make a copy of it and then come down and turn on and off the various layers that you want to isolate. And for this view, let's go ahead and turn on the door layer, and then we'll go ahead and close the display options. The next thing I want to do is use the clipping and break option to isolate only the front framing walls. You see in the upper floor, you can see a door behind the window, and on the first floor you can also see some additional framing behind that wall. Let's move over into the floor plan view. Then I'm going to come down, I'm going to click on the camera callout. Let's use the Open Object button. And I usually like to name these pretty descriptive, so I'm going to call this the Framing Front House Cross Section. On the plan display, I'll mark that the callout will show up on both sides. And then the label itself, we'll call this F1 for framing. Now a little bit of busy work in this case. Let's slide the section view up near the front of the wall, and let's tighten up the section so it's just going to split through the wall. And then side to side, we'll go ahead and pull these cameras out. I'm going to toggle on my crosshairs as I get ready to go in and make adjustments into the camera. Let's begin by zooming in on the left side of the structure. Let's click on the camera. Let's use the break tool. You'll find it in the lower edit menu. Also notice that there's a number 3 off to the side. You can use the number 3 as a shortcut, and we'll just create a break in the camera. When the break is there, we'll go ahead and slide that up just through the outside of the wall on the side, and then we'll just repeat the process. One of the things that I like to do is click on the wall, come down, you get an orthogonal snap, and then you can make that adjustment, slide it up into the wall, and then we'll just kind of repeat that process. Pick up the snap, create a break, go ahead and pick up the snap, create a break, and then pull that right through the front of the house. Slide off to the right, and we'll do one more right in this area, and then slide the section just through the front of the house. Let's go ahead and double click to open up the camera. You can see that the view is now much cleaner, removing the walls behind it. If you take a look at the side over here, notice that the wall for the fireplace bump out is not showing the wall above. Let's move over into the floor plan. Let's take a look. The framing on these walls are most likely occurring up in the attic wall. One solution would be to turn on the attic wall layer in the section view, or much like we did on the bedroom wall, I'm going to hold my shift key down, select all 3 walls, open them up. On the structure panel, I'm going to mark they are going to balloon through the ceiling above. And back in the section view, you can see that that attic wall is now being displayed as a result of marking those to balloon through the ceiling above. Let's move on and look at a few framing defaults and settings. When you build the framing, you can control the stud spacing in the build framing options or through the wall definition. Reason for controlling it through the wall definition may be for certain situations where you have customized framing and it makes it easier than manually framing that specific wall. Let's briefly look at both of these approaches. In the Build menu, let's come down to Framing and look at the Build Framing option specifically for the wall. The option for stud spacing is controlled right here for the automatic and default framing. In this case, it's 16 inches. Notice that on the wall at the bottom of the screen, my framing is at 22 inches on center, and it's controlled through the wall definition. Let's double click on the wall, and on the Wall Types panel, let's come over and click the Define button. You'll see all the layers that make up this wall. For the framing layer itself, come down, and the stud spacing, in this case, I've set it to be 22 inches on center. If you wanted to change it back, you can always click the little wrench. It will set it to the default. Again, setting this for a specific framing might be for an engineering condition for a specific wall. You can take advantage of the program's automatic framing to generate it for you. For those of you that are doing basements or basement remodeling projects, you might typically have a furred wall condition where the outer wall is concrete and the inner wall is framed. There are two ways you can accomplish this. The first is to use a single wall with the various wall layers, and the other way is to use two individual walls. For the Austin Sample House project, I've used two individual walls. The reason, because I have a complicated foundation and wanted the control over the framing structure, given that my foundation is stepped and I also have a hung platform, and I want to make sure that it was correct. The disadvantage is that I had to draw two different walls and then position them. In the end, I wanted a more accurate approach, and this worked best for this project. The final default and setting I'd like to make you aware of is control for header placement. Headers can be controlled through a span table or through the opening itself. When you're controlling it through the opening, you'll see the option to use the span table with the calculate from width setting or use a specific header size. When you're managing your header through the opening, there's an option to position the header at the top of the opening or at the top of the wall. The program's automatic wall framing is a great way to start. When you need to modify the framing, you can make changes and the program will prompt you to turn off the automatic framing. In this case, when I copy a stud and then add wall blocking, this wall has now been manually edited, and I want to make sure that it doesn't change in the future if I decide to do any updated framing. The way to do that is in the Wall Dialog Structure panel, check the option to retain the framing. When the framing is rebuilt, this wall will be omitted from the update. If it does need an update, open up that wall and remove the check mark for retain framing. In the final part of the session, let's look at the materials list for framing. Under the Tools menu is the option to calculate materials for all floors. This materials list contains all of the items for the project. To isolate the list to only framing, I'll select Edit Active View and then clear all the categories and reselect the framing category. In the upper left is the option to change the list to a cut list. This will make the list significantly longer, and then there's also an option for mixed reporting, which will do its best to combine a by list and consolidate lineal items like wall plates. For the by list category, you can modify the lumber table that you would use for purchasing. Depending on lumber pricing, you may want to make adjustments to this list to optimize your cost estimating. Further down, you can choose to consolidate the wall plates using the drop-down. The program will do its best to consolidate the majority of the wall plates it can. The materials list can help you with your cost estimating or checking on framing bids. Well, that wraps up this session on wall framing. Our next session for the Austin sample project will include roof and floor framing. Thanks for watching.
So we're going to take your live questions today. If you have a question related to wall framing, try to keep your questions in that realm if you can. If you do have other questions, maybe there will be time at the end. And when we call on you, make sure you unmute your microphone. Also, let us know your name and where you're calling from. So with that, I'm going to reach out to Carrie and see if we have any questions out there.
Hey, Scott, we're still waiting for people to raise their hand with questions, but we had some write-in questions. Can you demonstrate how to show framing changes for a remodel?
Okay, yeah, I saw that question get chatted in earlier. And if I just grab one of our example plans here, So one of the things that I've done here in the 2D view is you can see on the left-hand side of the structure, I kind of color-coded the wall type. You can see the green. And the difference in this wall type, if we just open it up, take a look at it, you'll notice that I've created a wall type called siding plank new. And when we go in here and you take a look at it, you see the green color in here, hence the fill that you see in the plan view. And then also on the texture for the framing, you see it how it's green. And when we take a 3D overview of this using our specific camera for the 3D framing, you can see when I frame that it also shows up in 3D because I've controlled the materials through that wall type. So it helps both in a 2D view as well as in the 3D view. So that's one approach you can use when you're trying to show the difference between an as-built and a remodeled condition.
Thanks, Scott. We have Jason here with a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Scott. I was trying to do a remodel on a basement where I put in a door. What's the best approach in terms of framing a door in a concrete basement wall?
Well, how would you frame, well, thanks for calling in, Jason. How would you frame the door in the concrete wall? Is there wood involved? Is it just cutting out the concrete itself?
Yeah, so what they do is, because they don't know the kind of what's in the concrete, the engineer will specify, you know, the king stud, jack stud, header type scenario. Sure. The opening might be, you know, call it 4 inches wider on either side.
Right.
So I've been doing that by hand, but I was trying to think if there's a better way.
So let's take a peek. I've got a concrete basement down here, right? And if we peek at this from the top down, let's see if we can understand and come up with a solution here. Give me just a second. Okay. And let's switch my view over to the 3D framing view so we can kind of look at some of the details here. So let's assume that you're going to put a door in this sort of a structure. Would that accommodate your question there, Jason?
Yeah, if you do it in the third wall, that would actually be ideal.
Okay, so you just want the door in the third wall, and then you want to cut out in the concrete wall?
Yeah, so if you throw a door in the concrete third wall, it should create you the opening.
Yeah. So in this case, as we zoom in here, I actually have two different walls. I have the third wall, which is just a 2x4, and then I have the concrete wall. Okay, so they're two unique wall types. And then when I grab my door, let me make sure that layer's turned on because it probably isn't. So let's just make sure we have the door turned on. All right. And with the door, let's go ahead and put the door in. Now, notice since those walls are so close together that it actually pushes it into both. And I think I have the automatic framing turned off. So I'm going to click on the wall, and then I'm going to build the framing uniquely for that wall. There's an edit menu tool in my lower menu here to build the framing for that particular wall. So then you see the framing update, and then let's go back in and see if we kind of peek around the other side. Of course, I put in a great big door that's going to stretch and have no header in there. So I may need to pull that down so we get a header in there. Is that what you're after?
Yeah, so that's the door. So normally in the concrete, though, it would be padded by a king stud, jack stud, and a header inside the concrete.
So you need to modify the concrete itself?
Well, the opening is just cut bigger, and then they put in a king stud, a jack stud, and a header.
Right. So in that type of a case, and then I'll probably let Al weigh in here. In that case, I'd probably modify this concrete wall type so it actually had some framing components in there. Because right now, if you look at this stem wall, there is no framing component inside of it. It's only really a concrete wall. And so when we click on the define button, there's only a singular layer. So it won't frame automatically unless I add the layers specifically for the type of framing, and then I would be able to get the program to build it. Let me pause here. Let me pause here and see if what Al might add to this.
I think I'd try that first. It would be very similar to putting a door in one of the standard brick walls that we have, where the door recesses into the framing. The other thing I might try is to modify the door's rough opening so that the cutout gets bigger. That would make it possible to maybe add some manual framing in there. But
that's what I do today. So I make the, yeah.
Yeah, but I like Scott's idea of getting some sort of framing component in there. It's gonna affect the entire wall. That's the only problem.
Yeah, so I tried Scott's idea, and I tried that idea with just the door. The problem is it frames all the way to the top and eliminates the concrete.
Yeah, and I think in that case, Jason, what you'd need to do is if you did change the wall type and put some framing members in there, and then you frame the wall, you'll want to open up the wall detail at that point and then remove all the additional framing that showed up in there and just have it frame around your door.
Right. Yeah, I might get quicker than the other way. Okay.
You could break the wall as well on each side and just change the wall type. You know, maybe a foot each side.
That's what I tried. Yeah, that's exactly what I tried. I tried creating just the wall type around the door, but then it would take the framing all the way to the floor above, which is not correct because yeah. Okay, but I could do that and then kind of place the concrete back, I suppose, for the next thing. Okay, thanks.
Okay, hey, thanks for calling in, Jason.
Our next question is from Scott Dennison. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, Scott.
Yeah, g'day, Scott. Thanks for your presentation. I did write in a question about blocking. In New Zealand, we often have 2 or 3 lines of blocking in the wall.
Okay.
Like every 32 inches is quite typical.
Okay.
So the program only allows you to do 1 row, but I noticed you manually put in some blocking just near the end of your presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible to do 2 or 3 rows of blocking every couple of feet?
Sure. Let's take a look. Well, thanks for calling in. It must be early morning there, I'm guessing, in New Zealand.
Yeah, not too bad. 8:30.
Yeah. Let me just grab a different plan here. And I have a simple floor plan. And let's turn on let's build our framing for the wall. So let's come down to the wall and build that framing. I'm going to just do it manually so that it won't be turning on automatic. So let's just tap on the wall and open up the wall detail. And in this case, you have a situation where you've got wall blocking in 3 different series, right? Up and down this wall.
Yes.
So one of the things I'm going to do is underneath the framing detail is we call it wall bridging in our program.
All right.
When you do your bridging in here, it's going to use the default, whatever you have it set up. This bridging, first of all, can be changed. So if you can come in here and say flat to the outside, you can also change the framing structure of it. And then if we just kind of slide that down, pull it down, and you said, oh, I don't know, let's put that at 30 inches or something, right?
Okay. Yes.
And then I'm going to slide a copy of that up, maybe 30 inches. And then we'll slide, well, I guess I did it from the center. So let's go ahead and put that at 30 inches. And we'll put it up that way. And then we'll slide one more copy up, and we'll just approximately put it in there. Is that approximately what you're looking to do?
Yes, yeah. We have what we call our bridging nogs, and they're usually flat. They just stiffen up the studs basically, because quite often we're not putting plywood on the outside, so. So it is a bit of a hassle for the electrician. He's got to drill through those to put his wiring in, but but that's quite common in New Zealand to have rows of nogs or bridging. Now, that's something I hadn't looked at, but is there an automatic tool where you can nominate, say, 2 rows and it'll put 2 rows through the whole or the wall framing?
Well, the nearest automatic thing that we have, I'm going to turn on the automatic framing here, is underneath the blocking when I build the framing. Right now, I don't have any blocking turned on. Is to check the option for blocking. That will only give me 1 row in this case, Scott.
Right.
I can't specify, in your case, 3 rows.
Or say 2. In an 8-foot stud, we have 2 rows.
Right. Yeah. I'm only going to get 1 row of blocking when I check the option down here.
Okay.
But that will build the framing with 1 row blocking. If we just peek at this in 3D, that should have built it with the 1 row.
Right. Yeah. So so the only other way is to do that manually with the bridging on each wall.
Right. You know, one approach, if you don't like doing it on every wall, you could do it on 1 wall and just show it as a detail that said, you know, all walls to be blocked per, you know, this detail, and you run your dimensions to show exactly where the blocking occurs.
Yes. Yes, could do. Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for calling in this morning.
Okay, you're welcome.
Scott, we have Vincent here. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, Vincent. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Where are you calling from?
Near Boston, Mass.
Okay.
Yeah, it's still a little chilly around here.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm working on a project. It's a garage that's led into the side of a hill. I have a 10-foot foundation wall in the rear that I need to step down as it goes forward. I was wondering if you could show. I have a double step down from 10 feet down to the stem, the garage wall, which is like 12 inches off the ground. You know. So I was wondering if you could demonstrate the framing on that. As far as the wall is, I know I've been trying to use a pony wall, but trying to connect them together is getting a little difficult for me for some reason. Maybe it's just the way I'm doing it. I don't know.
So your wall is stepping down the hill, and you want to show the framing and how that occurs.
Yes.
Is that right?
That's right.
Let me see if I have something here. And let me just close this guy up.
I'm a proud chief user since '98.
Wow, welcome.
Yeah.
You should be doing this presentation.
I know it.
Okay. So you see how I've stepped this one down? Is this similar to what you're doing here?
Yes. Yep. Only have one more step.
Yeah.
That goes up. So
basically what you're going to end up doing, let's open up an elevation camera here and peek at this. So that's where that step occurs, right in here.
Yep.
And what you end up doing, let me maybe delete this window out of here so we don't get confused. You said there was another step here.
Yes.
So this is a pony wall in Chief Architect, right? Where the upper wall is siding and the lower wall is concrete, right? It's called a pony wall. Well, you can take these walls and use the brake tool, right? And if I put another brake in here and we just kind of pull this up, you can use your dimensions to size it, right?
Yep.
And then we do the same over here. Actually don't know exactly what we've got going on there. That's probably not a pony wall in this case. So now I've created another step, and then you just reframe the wall and you can do it. In fact, it may be, let me just grab that other plan and rebuild the framing on that. And see what that looks like. So have you used the wall break tool?
Well, I used the wall break, but I was doing it in plan, not in the elevation.
Yeah, you're going to have to do that in an elevation view.
Okay.
Yeah, you're going to have to do that in an elevation view, and then you can break it and pull it up. That wall that I actually had probably was not a pony wall in this particular sample plan that I opened up. But if you have a pony wall, then you can break it and then make the adjustment and pull it up and down. Does that work?
Yep. Yeah, I think it will. What was happening is, to me anyways, I was getting coming up the top of the first concrete stem wall and then dropping it, and then there was like a little jog or something. It was weird. It was only like it jogged going down like a 6-inch jog, and then hit that step down then to the next one. So I got to figure out, where I'm going wrong here. But I mean, it looks good. I just, I'm a kind of a perfectionist, so I want to make it look just perfect.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to necessarily break your wall type in in a plan view, because you're going to separate the wall. And this one, let's see if that has a step down. Yeah, that one doesn't have the same step down that I'm after. But you want to make sure that when you're doing that, you're doing it in the elevation view, because then it's going to be more accurate.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you.
Welcome.
Scott, Denise wrote in and she was wondering if you could demonstrate an unfinished basement framed with 2x4 walls, but a first floor with finished walls.
Okay. So let's see. Let me close a few of these guys up. And let me just grab a simple plan here. Well, let's actually use the other one. So if I understand the question correctly, you've got a basement, and inside the basement are unfinished walls, and then in the upper floor above would be finished walls.
Correct.
So if we go down into the basement here, and currently I've got a wall type down here, and let's just change 2 of them. So I'm going to grab 2 of these walls. If this is unfinished and you want to see it without sheetrock, I'm assuming, let's go ahead and open up those walls. And you see I have this wall type. It's called interior 4 one-sided. I'm going to click the define button, and let's see if I actually have one that's just a framed wall. And if I don't, we'll make one. I'm kind of scanning my wall list here. It doesn't look like I have one, so I'm just going to make a copy of this. And we're going to call this a framed 4-inch wall. And the trick to that would be just to remove the drywall off the front of that. So I'm just going to come in here, hit the delete key, and so that wall type no longer has drywall on it. And then when we take our interior view, let's see if we can do that just with camera in here. I'll probably have to turn that layer on. And actually rebuild the framing for those walls. So let's just rebuild the frame, because I probably didn't. So there's our unfinished wall. The back wall was not changed, so there's your sheetrock. And if we go up a story, then using the floor indicator, then it doesn't affect those walls because I used a different wall type. So that's one approach you can use to create a unfinished basement with that type of a wall type. Does that work?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay.
And we have Duncan here with a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, Duncan.
Hi, Scott. I'm calling from Spokane Valley, Washington.
Oh my gosh, you should have just come over and talked to us.
Yeah, really.
Done it live.
I have a question about the headers for windows and doors and the 3D view. When I build the framing for the wall, I just see a straight header. I don't see any plate on top or below the header. Can you build the build the 3D model with the plates on top and the bottom of the header?
Sure. Let's take a look and let's grab a plan here that's just basic. So if I understand your question, you want to have a plate and a header. That's
Yeah, if you go over to the window to the right, it looks like on this elevation that there's a plate on the bottom of the header. Can there be a plate on the top of the header too?
Oh, okay. You want to see a plate on top of that header. Automatically, I don't know if there's an answer to that. Manually, we could certainly do it. Al, do you know, is there a way to automatically build this plate above the header?
The only thing that I can consider on that, I don't think there is, Scott, but if you use an I-joist for the header, that's what it's going to show. So rather than just use lumber, use an I-joist for the header. And then when you take a section like that, you're going to get that top chord of the I-joist.
Can you specify the I-joist as the header with that width of the wall?
That I don't know. I'd have to check. So
how would you do it manually?
So if we, I just drew a new wall here and we build the framing for that wall. Let's open up the wall detail. Okay. And of course, let's take that window and let's move it down in the wall a little bit so that we have a little bit of space here. So let's just move it down to 100 inches. And then let's open up that wall detail. So let's assume that I want to have a framing plate right above that header, right?
Right.
So the easiest thing to do is take the existing one, make a copy of it, and then I'm going to use the point-to-point move. And we'll just pick it up, move it up. Let's pull it up right there. Actually, slide it up just a little bit further. So I pulled it over there, and then you can see that I still got a problem where I need to trim the other ones off, right?
Right.
So now that the plate is selected, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the trim command. And I'm just going to kind of come in here and trim those off. And then you see as I kind of click on each one of those, they've been trimmed off.
Wow.
Is that what you're after?
Great. Yep.
Okay.
And how about, I have a second question. I hope this is easy. Is there an easy way, or what's the easiest way to align the studs with the floor joists?
The easiest way to align them. Al, do you have a suggestion on the easiest way to align them?
Use the framing reference.
Would that work? Will the studs build to the joists if you have a framing reference?
As far as I know, everything should build to that framing reference.
Okay.
So if you put it in, it should.
Okay.
Okay, I'll try that.
So give that a try, Duncan. Use the framing reference tool and see if that works for you.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Scott, let's check in with Wade. Go ahead and ask your question, Wade.
Yes, I'm in Canada and we have a 5-foot frost level. So with an ICF wall, when it starts down like 5 feet below grade and it comes all the way up, you get I can have 3 different types of wall type on that ICF in one wall.
Right.
And it's they'll want 4 feet of brick just above the grade, and then they want siding above that along the same wall.
Right.
Now, do I split it up? Because it's identical to the gentleman that was talking just a couple back. It's a step foundation. It's a walk-in. The first level is ground level.
Mm-hmm.
And you see what I'm saying? So it's the ICF below grade for the frost is going to be just ICF with, nothing on it really. And then you get just above grade, they want brick with drywall on the inside. Mm-hmm. And then 4 feet. And then they want, again, siding up above it. But can you do that all in one wall?
So Wade, if I understand your question, you live in the cold world,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got a, I don't know, let's say a frost line. We come down here and let's just say that's 5 feet where your frost line is.
Mm-hmm.
And we come down here and we maybe break this wall and pull it down, right?
Right.
And at some point, you're going to have a condition where you want some brick that's above the ground level. And if we just draw another line arbitrarily and call that our ground level where you want it to clear, right?
Mm-hmm.
And everything above there, you want it to be brick, but then you've got this upper portion of the wall, right? That's a third material type. Is that correct?
Yes.
So in Chief Architect, a pony wall is restricted to 2 wall materials.
Mm-hmm.
But you can use what's called a wall material region to show it visually. Have you used that before?
I'm familiar. I've only been using it a couple of months, but I run into like pretty much every headache I think possible so far. Like it's quite technical, these houses. And I understand what you're saying, but I got to show cross sections, everything like that. So would it be better just to make the whole ICF below grade, just, you know, like your foundation level layer, like a layer 0, and then when I got to show the foundation as a whole in a foundation plan, I just turn on the first level of the ICF above grade, like I add the level 1 to it in the foundation, turn it on, and that's how I'd have to show the foundation plan, because the back part of the foundation is on level 1 and the front part I would have to make on a foundation level, right?
Right. So, I mean, that you can certainly do it that way. You could also just draw the CAD detail up so that you can show it if you don't care about it in the 3D view. Now, one of the plans that I think I have here, I specifically drew the foundation on a separate level. And if we kind of go down here and look at this, this foundation is only the foundation, okay?
Right.
So then you go up a level, and this would be considered the daylight living space. I'm just going to go up 1 level.
Right.
Right? And this wall on this first level could be a pony wall that gets you the 2 different materials, right?
Exactly.
But in reality, there's a foundation wall that goes below that, right? And so that's an approach you can use is you could build the foundation just with a concrete wall or the ICF wall you mentioned.
Yeah.
And then go up a level on floor 1, which might be, you know, whatever floor that is, build that, and then go up and build it on the next level.
Yeah, I love that. I didn't think of that yet, and thank you. Yeah. I got another house just like this.
Yeah. So that's an approach you could use.
Are you guys going to get an ICF brick ledge? I've been drawing them in section by hand.
So you want a brick ledge that sits on top of the wall cap somewhere?
Yeah, it would be about, well, they want it like 4 inches below grade, and then you put like an ashlar block on, and then the brick on top of it at grade.
At grade. So one thing you could do is, are you familiar with a room molding or a molding ply line?
Yeah.
Well, that would be one approach you could do. Is I kind of clicked on the outside of that structure, and I could create that to a poly line, right?
Right.
And then I can assign a molding profile to it.
Okay.
And then you could set the elevation of that to whatever elevation you want.
Okay. Could you quickly show me how to do that?
Sure.
Just the elevation.
Let me just draw a line. We'll just make it simple. And I'm going to draw it out here so it's not too terribly far out.
Right.
So here's a line, and I'm going to convert it using this tool in my lower edit menu, okay? And it's called Convert to Polyline. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to convert it to this molding. So that allows me, when I convert it, to assign a profile to that molding. and let's assign it to a certain height. We'll just put something in so we can figure out where it's at, because I don't know where it's at off this particular one. And then on the molding, let's go in and grab a profile. And let's just use something we can actually see. And let's also make the width and the height 3 inches by 8 inches. I just want to be able to see it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now that I've got that, and let's just check and make sure what layer that's on. I'm going to turn on my, that's on the moldings layer. And when we go back over into the camera view, let's go down so we can figure out where this guy is. So there he is, right? Clearly that needs to be moved down. Let's just open him up and we'll move it down to minus 12 inches. And there you go.
Perfect. And I can make that, I can dress that up to look good just for a section. Thank you so much.
You bet. So maybe time for a couple more questions, and then I'm just going to kind of wrap up, be respectful of your time. If there are still questions after we go through that, then I'll stick around and answer a few more after that. So in the meantime, why don't we take 2 more questions and I'll do a closeout, and then we'll go on from there. Carrie?
All right, Scott, Vicky's up next. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, Vicky.
Hi, Scott. It's Vicki here over in Bend, Oregon.
Yeah.
I have 2 questions that involve the furred out framing in a basement level and following up on what the other lady asked about the finished wall above, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
I have had trouble sometimes trying to put 2 walls adjacent to each other without one of them taking over the whole wall.
Oh. Okay.
And how close can you get them together before they sort of merge or one blows away the other?
Okay.
That's the first question. The
Okay.
second question is, okay, you've got your furred out wall in the basement, whether it, let's say it does have drywall on the outside of it, and you go to the stairwell, and the upstairs is just a regular wall. So you've got this 4.5, 5 inch thing that's interfering with your stairwell and the width of the stairs.
Right.
Do you continue that furred wall all the way up? What do you do?
Right. Well, let's see if we can take your first question, which is how close can the wall get? Wow, I got a lot of stuff open here, so give me just a second. Okay. All right, so your first question about how close can the wall get, let's go into the plan that we were kind of working on. And in this case, if we zoom real close in, I've got 2 walls here, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've got, in fact, let's turn on our layers so we can kind of see the level of detail here. So this is a 6-inch concrete wall with a lower ledge that has an 8-inch, and then this is a furred wall out here. So the question is how close can these get? So let's just pull this wall out. And you see this wall when I click on it, that I actually have the outside of this wall is made up of an air gap. So when I go to bump this wall next to the concrete wall, it bumps because I have an air gap on there. And if we go in and we look at this wall, and you see that the insulation gap is 1 inch to the outside, and that's why you're seeing this down here, this 1 inch air gap to give me that barrier on there. So if I didn't have that on there, then I could actually then move that wall. Let's just flip it 180 degrees so that it's the other way. Then I move the wall. Let's just click, pull that wall out, and then bump it up to the next of it. It's still going to bump, but now it's exactly snug to the wall.
how would you get it to snug? Because you're showing like a 8-inch at the bottom level, like a footing on your foundation wall.
Well,
How would you get it right next to the 6-inch part?
Okay, well, first of all, I changed the wall type because you see how I have this ledger in here?
Oh, okay, okay.
So if I didn't say this is a pony wall and we just switched it to an 8-inch concrete wall, right?
Right.
Let's get rid of that. So now it's right next to it. And so it's going to bump right next to that wall.
Okay. Maybe it's a glitch that's been improved in X13, because I've had that happen in the past where I try to move a wall next to another wall and it just messes up. You know, sometimes I'll do that with a foundation wall like that. Sometimes it's a plumbing furred wall that's not as tall as the other wall. Like say you have a 2-story exterior wall, but on the first story, excuse me, on the first story, you need to add a 4x plumbing wall so that you're not interrupting the insulation on the outside wall. So the 1-story regular wall butts up against what's a 2-story exterior wall, and it doesn't happen. Somehow it doesn't happen.
Okay.
What I've resorted to just to do it in plan view is just do a polyline solid.
Well, I mean, if you run into it, you could reach out to us and we'll take a look at it.
Yeah. The other question involved, when you have a stairway that's going up from a basement to the upstairs and it's against the outside wall, what do you do do you have to fur out the upper wall the same way in order for the stairwell wall and the stairs to be aligned?
Okay. So
and then what happens upstairs when you no longer need a furred wall? I mean, you've got a wall showing furring all the way across, but what if you don't want to do that upstairs?
Sure.
You know?
Well, something's got to give. So in this case, here's a set of stairs in a basement. And you're looking at the green part as the furred wall, right? And you go up to the floor above, right? If we hit reference display, let's just check here.
Yeah, and you've had to do something.
So something has to give, right? Because this red line represents your foundation wall. I have got that reference display on. So something's got to give, right? I don't know what the best way is to solve it, but if we take a peek inside this house, here's what I did in this case.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Zoom in. I just used a solid and put a wall cap on the thing.
That's reasonable. If you can make that, you know, if you can incorporate that somehow into the style of the house and make it look aesthetically pleasing.
Right. So it just depends on what's the design desire. And in this case, this happened to be a simple little as-built that I had that, you know, that was the way it was. And so this is just a solid. If you tap on this guy right here, that's just a solid.
So that could work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One last thing I wanted to comment about the framing references. I've tried to put a framing reference in sometime, and it'll tell me I can't use one on that level or for that type of framing, or I can't even remember exactly what it was. But they don't seem to be universal.
So it used to be that on a foundation level, I'm on the foundation floor 0 here, and you go underneath the framing, build framing, and you go to put in a reference framing marker, and you put it in, and let's just click on a wall over here. You put that in, and in, I can't remember what version, may it be also X13, you may get a notification that says, well, we don't really allow that on floor 0.
Yeah.
Well, turns out they are allowed. It's just a weird message that we've fixed, and that no longer shows up when the new X14 comes out.
Okay.
So that's the deal. But also the reference framing framing just works better. And I actually, not sure you need those so much anymore, because in these wall frames, you can open up the wall itself on the structure panel. You can either use the framing reference marker. I'll pause here for a second so you can see this. I'm down in the framing category.
Mhm.
You can either use the framing reference marker or you can ignore it, and then the wall will just roll out based on the start of the wall. So if you have a 16-inch on center framing, it will just roll out based on wherever the start of the wall is. That reference framing doesn't always work depending on the orientation of the wall and where it aligns on the grid. So this may be an option you can explore to make sure your wall is not using that framing reference marker, and then the wall framing will roll out based on the wall itself and what it's specified to.
Yeah, I usually try to align the rafters or trusses over a 24 on center wall for advanced framing.
Right.
And the floor doesn't usually go to 24 because they need to be closer together usually.
Right.
But I want to be able to easily align those without having to go in later and move all the studs.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Right.
maybe
Yep,
a framing reference will work for that. And I used
Sure.
to try to do it again for the floor joist. And then I'd get that message that you were talking about.
Right.
Okay, that's all from me.
Okay, well, thanks for calling in.
Hey, bye.
Okay, so one more question, then we'll do a closeout, and then I'll stick around if you still have some more questions with that.
All
Carrie?
right, Scott, we have Gary here. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Scott. This is Gary from New Hampshire.
Hey, Gary.
I had a design that I was playing with that was a shed roof.
Okay.
And typical shed roof where the ceiling is the bottom of the roof. And I decided to experiment with offset gable roofs instead of that shed roof.
Okay.
So again, like a shed, one wall is taller than the back wall. So the offset gable, it's essentially 8 feet from the front of the house is the ridge line, and then it slopes down to the back of the house. What I found is that unless I very carefully calculate the height of that highest wall, it will insert a little attic wall that's about 6 inches tall. And I also have problem with interior walls meeting up with that ceiling when I do an offset gable. Sometimes they'll stick right through the roof. Sometimes they'll fall short. I can't seem to get them to automatically fit the new roof.
Right. Let me change this wall here and let's see if we can repeat what you're seeing. I'm going to change this to a high shed gable wall. And so I now have a shed roof in here, right?
Yeah.
Not that we can tell, but let's take a peek at it. Oh, yeah, it's maybe a ski jump shed roof. Let's let's tighten that up a little bit. We'll make it a little shallower here. There we go. Okay, so we now have a reasonable shed roof.
Yeah.
And you mentioned let's turn on our build framing, and we'll come down to framing, and let's turn on the automatic wall framing. And then we'll switch our layer set over to the 3D framing. Okay. So sometimes you see how I'm getting a small little indicator here with that plate.
Yeah.
Depending on if you have windows in there or something, you may not get. In fact, let's just do this view so that it's maybe even more obvious that we have our 3D framing on. You don't see that attic. It's considered the attic wall, right? Now you can mark that wall as a balloon wall. Have you used that feature?
Yeah, and I think somehow that's necessary here because there is no attic. I want the room to go all the way up to the roof.
Right.
But I have to almost manually dimension each wall to get it to do that.
So if I mark these 2 walls as balloon through, that's going to force, in fact, let's make sure we grab all 3 walls and have those balloon up. And I'm just going to come on to the structure panel, right? And we're going to look for the balloon through the ceiling above. And since we have the automatic framing on, it's going to then go up and meet, if this is forming our, this roof is forming the ceiling for us, it's going to go up and then meet up to the bottom of that roof plane.
Yeah, and that works fine when I was doing the shed roof, but now when I do an offset gable, so let's say the left third of the building we're looking at slants back downward.
Okay.
It ends up putting this little 4-inch tall attic wall. I can't get that front framing to go all the way up to the offset gable.
So you're saying your roof, let's turn off the automatic roofs. And, oh boy, let's see here. And let's take and make this a 8 and 12 or something that's a little bit bigger so we don't have so much of a problem. So I'm going to lock the fascia top and let's change that to maybe 8 and 12.
Okay.
Okay. And then we'll join that over there. Let's see if we got close. I don't know if we did. Okay, so you got something like that?
Yeah, it looks great from the outside. Can you show me the framing now and what that
Yeah,
did?
let's see. I think we had the automatic framing on, right?
All right, look at that front edge again. Huh. All right.
Yeah, that's not perfect.
See, what I end up getting, where you have that top plate, I'll get little 4-inch stubs and then another top plate. It puts a little attic wall in there.
Yeah, make sure that you've marked that wall because I'm sure I would maybe possibly get the same thing in here. If I uncheck the balloon through, make it automatic, I don't know if I have enough. Is that what you're getting?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm seeing.
Yeah, so make sure that your side walls and your front wall are marked to balloon through.
Okay. And the interior walls, if I have a couple of them that are running perpendicular to the ridge line here,
right?
Those also don't seem to want to meet the roof. And
yeah,
in one case, the wall did, but the sheetrock didn't.
Well, that's called ventilation. Before I connect that, if this room does not have a ceiling in it, so let's pop the ceiling out, right? So it's got that, and then we pull this wall back. Well, let's just leave it open, and we should have automatic framing on. Let's go back into the framing deal. It should follow it.
Okay, I must just not have done the balloon setting correctly, because that's exactly what I'm trying to accomplish.
Okay, good.
All right, thanks, Scott.
Hey, thanks for calling in, Gary.
Our next question is from Karen. Hi, Karen, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello, Scott. This is Karen from outside of Pittsburgh.
Hi, Karen.
Hello. The deck framing that automatically gets generated when you specify a deck. How do I go in and modify that? Because we don't build our deck framing the same way that Chief does. How do I go in there and modify all of that so mine will automatically come in the way we do it?
Sure.
We normally put our support beams in line with the joists and have the joists at, the beam is not below framing. How can I go and modify all of that so I'm not constantly redoing it?
You can manually modify it, and I can't get you to do it automatically. But what we could do, let's just use our deck railing tool, and we'll sketch out a deck over here. And so let's just kind of sketch a deck out over here, and let's make sure that we're on the framing walls. Let's switch it back over. There we go. I'm just going to take and sketch a deck out into this structure here. So when you use the deck tool, obviously it comes in and does that. And then if you peek at this inside of the deck structure, you know that on the deck panel, you can control the deck planking, the information here, and then under the deck support, right, there's the beam information. So you can set those, and you can set those in your profile if you typically use certain sizes of dimensional lumber, right?
Yes.
You're aware of that setting. Okay. So let's assume that that's all good. And let's switch over to our framing. And let's just turn off our deck planking because I don't want to see that view. And there may be a foundation here. Okay, so that built the deck framing on the floor below. Okay, so here's what the program gave me based on the size of that deck. Of course, it's not engineered in any way, but this is what it did. So this is about as good as we can get. Now you can modify this deck framing. Did you say your deck beams go parallel or perpendicular to the
Well,
structure?
they're in line with, and normally Chief puts them below the joists, the beams.
Oh, you want the, okay, so you want these in line, right? Let's peek.
Yes, and we usually do 3 2x12s together to create the beam. So if
right.
So I'm gathering
yeah,
there's no way I can create.
I don't know that we have a good automatic way to do that. Now, if your beam is, you said, you know, you could change your beam to a 2 by, you said you use a, what do you use for your deck beam?
3 2x12s.
Okay, so I could change this beam to a 2 by 12. And then when I frame it, then I would just make a copy of it. But since this is after the fact, let's go ahead and change the width of this to a, 1.5. Let's turn off the automatic framing. And then I can make a copy of that in both ways. Let's slide that over 1.5 inches and then do it the other way. And then I'm going to get, 2. Right. Yeah, but I can't do that automatically.
Okay, that's what I was trying to find out because I have been doing it manually every time.
Right.
We've been doing a lot of decks recently, but especially with COVID. But I just was trying to find out if there was a way to set all of that so it would automatically come in that way. But
yeah, the easiest thing to do is when you, let me switch back so I can get to that deck room, is when you open up your deck defaults, go into your support, and for your deck beams, set that to a 1.5 by 12, right?
Mm-hmm.
A 2 by 12, and then you can make a multiple copy of it. And that will get you the 3, because what I don't have here is I don't have the ability to say use n numbers of those deck beams.
Right.
Which is probably the number you need.
Right.
So that may be easier for you instead of using the, the 3.5 setting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then, any of the other things in here that will help you, set that as your profile plan. And then maybe that gets you a little less manual editing for your deck.
Okay. So then one other question with regard to this. Once I set it all manually, is there a way for me to keep it? Because every so often I've made other changes elsewhere and like the deck framing and everything will disappear and then it will regenerate.
Yeah.
The cheap way. Not
you gotta hate that, right?
Yeah.
So when I modified that beam, it unchecked this setting underneath the deck room. There's a setting here that says automatically regenerate the deck framing.
Right.
So if that's on and you start moving this deck, that's going to change my deck framing. If we go back in, I'm now back to whatever it was because it automatically updates it. So if you want to turn that off, that setting is underneath of the deck room, and you want to make sure that you turn that on and off.
Okay.
Does that work?
Okay. Well, it's a little helpful.
Yeah. Maybe something there for you.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
Okay, you bet. Thanks for calling in.
Scott, Stacy wrote in, she doesn't have a mic, and she was wondering if you can demonstrate how to build a chimney with its framing on an exterior wall that extends above the roof and has a brick or stone veneer.
Oh boy, seems like I recently was looking at something like that. I'm trying to figure out if I have that. Okay, so I don't have the plan I was looking for handy, but let's assume that we want to put a fireplace on this structure we've been working with. Couple ways you can do it, depending on, the fireplace. One way is to do a bump out. So I could come in here with a set of walls, right, and do a bump out. And then if this room is higher than normal, we could come in here with the room type information, and we could just significantly increase the height. In this case, let's just move it up by plus 6 feet. And then when we take a 3D overview, that particular item is going to pop up, and then I'm going to need to do some finish work on it. Other way that I might do that, you could change those walls or paint those walls with brick. The other way I might also do that is use a solid tool so that it looks pretty good and I can do a detail on it. So using the solid tool, just come in here. I'm just going to make this a little bit. Let's just pull it in there. And let's make that a little bit larger. I'm going to concentrically resize that. And if we just said the height of this is, what, 100 and, or not 100, but 16 feet, then we take a peek, then we should have a chimney cap in there that we could put on there. And let's grab that solid. It looks like that solid needs to be a little bit taller. So let's say plus 3 feet. And then I can go in and spray that and grab a chimney flue out of the library and apply it with the materials. Hopefully that helps with some of the, questions about how that works or how you might create a chimney with that style.
Thank you, Scott. Our next question comes from Derek. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hey, Steve, this is Derek from Houston. I was actually got a laundry list of questions, so cut me off whenever you want.
Okay. How about now?
What's that? How about now? Thanks for sticking around. I appreciate it. First thing, how do I incorporate automatically hangers and strapping? Or is there a way to do that so I can get your accounts on it?
Right. So the answer for automatics, let me just pull this back. And let's take a peek at this guy. I think I put some hangers in here. The answer is you can't do that, Derek, easily. Well, you can't do it automatically. Okay.
Okay.
And if we peek inside here, I've put some hangers on those joists to put them on the I-beam, right?
Right.
And the easiest way to do that is to zoom in. Let's switch that over to our framing floor. And you see how I have those joist hangers put in there?
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably a Simpson, I don't know what that is, ITS Simpson hanger, right? So then you grab the hanger and then you place it and then you use the multiple copy tool.
Sure.
And in this case, if my joists or my trusses are on 24-inch on center, then you use a multiple copy reflect around the beam, and that's how you might do that. But there is no automatic way to place those on this structure. Okay.
All right. Well, that would be a good feature add.
Okay, we'll make note of it.
Because we also use, we have a lot of hurricane strapping and 8.5s and all kinds of stuff.
Sure.
We put a lot of steel in our houses.
Yeah.
And then also, when we've got, we typically build our second floors on trusses, and sometimes we have beams that are not the full height of the truss between the floors. How do you automatically build the cripples above the beam, or is there a way, or does it just need to be? So if I've got, you know, a 20-inch truss and then I've got a beam that goes across a header on, and you know, it's only a 14-inch, how do I get that extra 6-inch to infill?
Let's take a peek if I understand your question here. Let me switch this to a 3D framing structural. I should have a beam that's a little bit thinner. Okay, so in this case, if I find one here. Okay, so in this situation, if I switch my camera, maybe I can, you see how these floor trusses are higher than the beam?
Yeah.
So when you draw your beams in here, right, you can open them up and you can lock the top height, or you can lock the bottom height, or you can lock the depth. So once your structural guy has given you what that information is, when you draw these, they're going to come in at the right elevation. They're probably going to be centered on the wall plate. And then if you need to then move them up or down, then you can lock the appropriate one. In this case, I have it set to lock the, you know, the overall height and then set at the bottom. And then it's when you put your posts in, or you have, I think they call them squash blocks or something like that. So you fill the space that is devoid if you're going to be spanning plywood or whatever over the top of those.
Right.
So that's probably the easiest way.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll give that a try. I was just trying to eliminate a lot of manual edits.
In that case, there is no automatic click the button and we figure out whether that beam should be, you know, at the top of the floor or the bottom of the floor.
Okay. Also on the beams, is there any way to have it automatically place, you know, a double or a triple stud at the end of it to carry the load down? Or is that just all manual stud edits?
Yeah, so you see how I have a few of those beams coming down through, or posts. Those, you know, in some cases, maybe those are king studs or posts. And to double those up when you are looking at it, let me switch over into the framing for the walls in here. Basically, you're going to need to call those out. Let's move down one floor. See if I have some. Yeah, it's basically going to be manually editing those and calling those out, depending on what the engineer spec'd for you.
Okay.
So
that sounds good.
The program doesn't do any automatic engineering for you.
Okay, that's fine. All right. What about on front porches? A lot of times we'll put tile, or just porches in general. We'll put tile on there. Is there any way to have it show angled joists? So you know, a lot of times we'll take a 2x8 and then we'll taper it from, you know, 7.5 to 6, and to provide the slope on the porch so that it drains correctly during rain.
So in this case, you see these beams out in front here?
Yeah.
That's going to be carrying actually earth, and it's going to be sloped. And the way that that was handled, I believe, first of all, you can't slope those unless you use a polyline or a solid tool. Let me switch over into, is that the framing for the floor? No. Where is that site plan? Yeah, basically all it's going to do is there's a slope indicator, and I don't see it. I don't know what layer set that's on top of my head, but you're going to do a slope indicator for the information for those.
Okay, so there's no way to really show that in a cross section that it's sloped.
Well, you can do it in a cross section. Certainly do it in a cross section. In fact, let's see if we can grab one here. So when you do your section, you could easily put a slope indicator in here and show that, you know, In fact, not that this is much slope, but 1 inch slope.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So you just handled it with a note then. Not okay. All right. Then my last question we do a lot of crawl space framing as well. And sometimes we'll use engineered beam, or sometimes we'll use, 3 or 4 2x12s. And it's a pier and beam construction, and our pier caps are spaced sporadically, no rhyme or reason to them. And I thought I'd maybe come across a solution to it where I grouped 4 2x12s together and then got them in the general location, and then either cut or extended them or dragged them to the appropriate length and then exploded them. But then when I exploded them, they just went to a CAD layer instead of maintaining the 2x12 lumber. Is there a way that I can do that so that I can change the length of them all at one time in a grouped situation versus, trim or extend functions?
So are those, did you say those are solids or something initially?
No, I would draw in a 2x12.
Okay.
And then I would copy it 3 times, so I'd have my 4 2x12s.
Okay.
And then I group them together, and then I would just get them close to all the other locations that I needed them. And then while they were grouped, I would stretch them to fit to the appropriate pier caps where I needed them. But then when I went to explode them, I mean, they looked like 2x12s, but they came in on the CAD layer and appeared to have lost their properties as a 2x12. So they weren't getting picked up in my material takeoffs.
Okay.
And I'm just curious if there's a way to do that, or if I'm stuck just, making multiple copies and cutting and extending all of those copies.
When you convert an object, let's say I have an object in here, and you go to convert it, whatever layer that may be on, where is this? Let's say we're going to convert this into, oh gosh, who knows what it is. But at the very bottom in here, you can specify the layer when you go to convert these things. Have you seen that?
I see it now.
So that may help you when you go to convert something, and that will, adjust the layer. It may not help you in the materials list. I don't know. You may need to go in once you've done that and, explicitly include that. But that will at least help address what the layer is that it's going to be assigned to when you convert an object.
Okay. Well, I wasn't necessarily converting it. I would just draw the joist in there. Okay. And then I would copy the joist. I would use the joist tool and just draw a single joist.
Yeah.
Then I copied it 3 times, so I'd have 4 of them together. But then I guess I made a block out of those 4 items.
Oh, right.
And then I take that block and I moved it around and got all the multiple spots that I needed it. And then I just
unblock them.
And then I unblocked it. And when I unblocked it, it put everything back on a CAD layer versus a lumber layer.
Yeah,
and it lost the properties of a floor joist.
I'd have to look at it because, I just have to take a look at it.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, thanks for calling in, Derek.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for sticking around. I appreciate it, Steve.
You bet. Carrie, do we still have a couple more questions?
We have 3 more questions if there's time.
Okay, we'll do 3 more.
Okay. The first one was written in from Sharna, and she asked if you could demonstrate metal stud framing.
Okay. Let's take a look here. Let's grab a wall here. And let's draw a wall just in here. And when you go to frame your wall, let's go ahead and look at this wall type in here. And let's look at the structure component. Actually, let's go in and set at the wall types. Currently, the wall that I used is an interior 4 wall, and the materials that make it up is a fir framing. So what I'm going to do is make a copy of this, and I'm going to call it interior 4 steel. Then I'm going to come down into the material, and let's just do a search for steel. Framing. And the type should be C-channel. So a couple changes. The material from steel framing, then I changed the type to C-channel. And then when we build the framing for that wall, see how that is showing up as C-channel. And if we build, let's just build the framing for one other wall, and then we'll take a 3D overview of the framing. That's how I got a steel framed wall.
Perfect, thank you. Our next question is from Doug. Go ahead and ask your question, Doug.
Okay, can you hear me?
Hi, Doug.
Yeah, hi. I run into this all the time in as-builts. The builder, for whatever reason, will have a small jog in the wall, maybe 3 or 4 inches, or as much as maybe 6 or 8 inches. There'll be a slight offset, so the wall goes along, jogs over a bit, carries on. I can't see any way of making a wall at right angles to that jog to make it an as-built condition. The jogged wall doesn't want to seem to be there.
Okay. So let's see.
An offset in the wall, you know?
Right. So in this case, you've got a small 6-inch wall or something like that, right?
Yep.
And it's very small.
Yeah, maybe half the width of the other wall. So the walls, yeah. So try making that offset like 2 inches. Yep. See the connecting walls disappeared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's Al, do you have a commentary on that? Well, how to maybe handle that?
I've seen that before. The only thing I've done is just put an end cap on the wall. If you look at it in 3D, I don't know whether that's going to heal up correctly.
It doesn't.
And you know, rather than waste a lot of time with it, in the past, I've just used a polyline solid to close that gap and to show the drywall. That actually looks like it hooked up.
In that one, it did heal up properly, but it doesn't in plan view. And
yeah, that's what I used.
Depending on the complexity of the wall, it may not heal at all.
Yeah, I just either use CAD or a polyline solid and fill it and move on.
Yeah, and the other thing that happens the odd time with that is it destroys the room definition.
That should hang on.
Yeah, should, but sometimes it doesn't. I see what you're doing there, Scotty. That's not a bad solution, really. Just
and then we just have to kind of clean it up a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's it.
Thanks for calling in, Doug.
Scott, our final question is from Marge. Go ahead and ask your question, Marge.
Hi, Scott. This is Marge from Missouri.
Hi, Marge.
Hi. My worst plan for my house has changed to a post and not a post and beam, but it's a laminate post that's a 6x8.
Okay.
And it extends into the ground and goes up through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
And it sits on a concrete round base under the frost line.
Okay.
It's going to have metal exterior on the outside and also on the roof.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out how to design that in my home because I've got it done in the wood design. So how do I switch over to like the barn dominium style?
Right. You've called in a couple times about this horse barn, right?
Well, I'm actually doing 3 different designs, and the first one has gone on, and it's gone to the contractor the way it is, and he converted it to his plan. And then I'm working with another guy that I've been on site and educating myself because I'm not used to doing anything with the metal. And I'm trying to figure out how to be able to show that to the, I've got 2 or 3 other people that are looking at something like this. Very common in our area now. So I need to learn how to do this.
So is your question about how do you change a framing member from wood to steel?
No, it's actually going to be wood.
Okay.
It's a laminated wood post.
Okay.
It's just designing it. It's actually going up. The posts are set on 10 foot. So like a 60 by 60 building has 7 posts on each side.
Right.
And then the purlins go across for the walls and stuff. I'm just trying to figure out how to actually do that on my foundation plan.
Okay. So if I draw a post, let's come into our framing tool and we use a post. Let's actually go down and put this down below. I'm not sure what we've got going on here, but let's make sure that we turn on our framing so I have that.
Well, like when you're building the foundation plan and it offers you the post and beam, do I need to use something like that for it?
You can start there, sure. If we go in and we say, let's build our foundation, and let's go in and we'll build it with that. And let's change this to something a little bit higher. And let's see what we've got here. So now I've got these posts, right?
Right.
And you can ignore that I have a concrete wall here.
Okay.
Actually, I can't apparently do it that way, but let's say that's a grade beam. So you can adjust these, and if you wanted to say that, you know, these aren't concrete, and you can open them up or just find the material and change them. I think you said that it was going to be some sort of a laminate. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like a 2 by 8 laminated with 3.
So we could just come in. Let's open up the library.
It's more like an LVL, I would say.
Sure. And then we could, you know, apply that on there, and then you can use your multiple copy in this case. Let's go ahead and delete those other guys here. And we'll just set our multiple copy up to be, we'll just slide 3 of those copies over, something like that. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So
now
the post and beam thing can give you a start. You can also just manually draw them in yourself. You notice if I delete the wall off to the side, it actually deletes those piers because those are foundation piers. So it might be easier just to draw them in yourself and then, you know, dimension them and space them. Get your first one set at the right elevation, and then you can use your copy tool and then be pretty specific about it.
Would I be able to show those beams going through the first floor and the second floor?
You should be able to. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. I mean, these beams, you know, you could move those wherever you need to, or these posts, you know, if that's going to be pulled up however you want.
Okay. Actually, and I had never, well, this was new to me. So those beams went all the way through the roof, and then they get everything solid.
Right.
And then they'll trim those off afterwards, which.
Right. Yeah. That's I guess, maybe
Typical.
common in our area with pole barns. We have a nice,
Exactly.
we have a nice pole barn article, or it's being updated. We can chat that out if that.
Yeah, I think Carrie, I think that may be the one that Carrie put on there for me, and I'll go look at that. But yeah, I see how it's gone right on up now. On that.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's what I needed. Thank you so much.
You bet.
I'm enjoying your programs, learning lots.
Okay, well, wonderful. Thanks for calling in. Okay, well, that wraps up our event today. Just a couple wrap up things. We've got our series going on, and next week we're going to be back with more framing, specifically for the platform, the floor platform, and then the roof framing for this project, followed by elevations, cross sections. We'll have a couple of weeks for kitchen design, and then bath design, and then we're going to do a little bit about remodeling and as-built overlays. So those are events all happening over the course of the next Thursday sessions, same time, same place. So you can sign up for those on the website. If you want to attend training, we now have training in person, and we're excited to see you. We're going to be back in Dallas on May 19th and 20th. So we have a kitchen and bath class, also a intermediate residential class. Those are happening in Dallas. We'd love to see you there if you can make it. And then we have a virtual training that will be occurring for the intro class, and that will start on May 4th, about a month from now. Those are online, so if you want to do that from the convenience of your home or your office, you can easily do that. So I just wanted to also point out that we do one-on-one personal training. If you'd like to screen share and tackle a project with one of our certified trainers, that's something that you can sign up for or give us a call, and we'd be happy to help you out. So that wraps up today's presentation. Hopefully you had a great day. We'll see you back here, same place, same time next week.